Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge into fascinating sources to get you the essential insights fast. Today, we're looking at bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
And, we tend to think of them in pretty simple terms, right? Like they're either the good guys in yogurt
Probiotics.
or they're the bad germs we're always washing our hands to avoid. But it turns out there's, a much darker side, a kind of brutal secret these tiny things have.
Absolutely. And that's what this deep dive is all about, a really quite recently discovered and honestly pretty sinister survival strategy. We're talking about bacterial cannibalism.
Cannibalism
Oh.
in bacteria. That sounds intense.
It is far more complex and, ruthless than most people would probably imagine.
And this isn't just like a wild idea. There's solid research behind it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We're basing this on some groundbreaking work led by Glenn D'Souza over at Arizona State University. It just got published in Science.
Okay.
And D'Souza himself said something that really grabs you. He said, when things get tough, you eat your neighbors.
Wow. Okay. And he meant bacteria doing that.
He meant bacteria, yes. You see, for ages, the understanding was mostly that bacteria just sort of soak up nutrients from, whatever's around them.
Right.
But this new research shows some species have this incredible microscopic weapon. It's called a Type VI Secretion System, T6SS for short.
Okay, a T6SS. So it's not just absorbing anymore. What is this thing? You called it a weapon. I heard it described as sort of a microscopic harpoon gun. Is that accurate?
That's actually a really good way to put it. Yeah. Think of it like a tiny built-in syringe or harpoon right in the cell wall.
Okay.
And it doesn't just leak out toxins. It actively shoots this sharp needle-like spike, which is coated in deadly toxins, straight into another cell right next to it.
Seriously, it injects its neighbor.
It pierces them, and basically tears them apart from the inside. Now, for a while, scientists figured the main point of this was, turf wars.
Like clearing out the competition for space?
Exactly. Making room to grow. But what D'Souza's team seems to have found is a much darker purpose for this harpoon gun.
Which is where the cannibalism comes in.
Precisely. That was the big discovery. They found this T6SS weapon is used for, eating other bacteria, especially when food gets scarce.
How did they figure that out? How do you even watch that happen?
Well, they used some pretty sophisticated stuff, time-lapse imaging, genetic tools, and they saw bacteria that are normally, quite peaceful neighbors suddenly turn aggressive when they were starved of nutrients.
You mean they actually watched them attack each other? Tiny little microbes going into battle?
That's exactly what they saw, ambushing nearby microbes, stabbing them with the T6SS. And the description from Astrid Stubbusch, who was the first author on the study, is really vivid.
Oh, yeah. What does she say?
She described how the attacker then slowly feeds on their remains while the victim kind of bleeds out.
Bleeds out. Wow.
Huh.
That's graphic for bacteria.
It is. But she explained the logic behind it, saying, by slowly releasing nutrients from their neighbors, they maximize their nutrient harvesting when every molecule counts. It's incredibly efficient, even if it sounds brutal.
Chillingly efficient. So it's like a slow, deliberate draining of resources from the victim. Is this just weird lab behavior, or does this happen in nature?
No, definitely not just a lab thing. D'Souza made it clear this kind of microbial warfare, this cannibalism, happens naturally. It's going on in the ocean, it's happening in soil, it's even happening potentially right inside your own gut.
Inside us. Okay, that's a thought. So if they saw this happening, how did they prove it was really intentional? Like the bacteria meant to do it to survive and it wasn't just some, accidental side effect.
Right, good question. They needed to test that intentionality. So they set up a clever experiment.
How did that work?
They took some of these bacteria and used genetic tools to basically disable their T6SS weapon. They broke the harpoon gun, essentially.
So they were defenseless.
Exactly. Then they put these defenseless ones in a nutrient-poor environment right alongside bacteria that still had their working T6SS.
Ah, okay. So a direct comparison. What happened?
The results were pretty stark. The ones without the weapon, the defenseless ones, they just died off when the nutrients ran out.
And the others, the ones with the harpoons.
They weaponized, as the researchers put it. They started attacking their neighbors and survived by, eating them.
So it proved the T6SS was actively being used as a survival tool. Kill or be killed, basically.
Pretty much. It really solidified the idea that this isn't random violence. It's a calculated survival strategy for harsh times.
This really does change how you think about bacteria, doesn't it? Beyond just good or bad. So what's the big picture implication here? How does this change our fundamental understanding?
Well, it means we have to see bacteria as much more sophisticated strategists than we thought. Not just passive little blobs, but organisms capable of complex, almost predatory behavior when they need to be. It really deepens our view of the microbial food web, how they compete, how they adapt.
Their adaptability seems key here.
Yeah.
And does understanding this microscopic weaponry, does it have any practical use? Like for medicine?
Potentially, yes. There are definitely medical implications being considered. If we can understand exactly how these T6SS harpoons work,
Hmm.
we might be able to hijack them, maybe, or design drugs that mimic them to target specific harmful bacteria, pathogens, or perhaps even develop ways to disarm the weapon in bacteria we don't want attacking others, maybe even helpful ones in our gut.
Interesting. Using their own weapons against them, or maybe just taking the weapons away. And thinking even bigger, you mentioned this happens in the ocean. Could this bacterial warfare actually impact something huge like the global carbon cycle?
That's one of the really startling possibilities, yeah. It's a huge potential impact.
How does tiny bacteria fighting influence something on that scale?
Well, think about the ocean. It's massive, and it plays a critical role in absorbing and cycling carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Lots of marine bacteria are essential for breaking down organic stuff, like dead algae.
Okay, the ocean's recyclers.
Exactly. They're crucial for that whole process. Now, what if these T6SS wielding cannibal bacteria are specifically targeting and killing those important recycler bacteria?
Ah, so if the cannibals kill off the recyclers.
It could disrupt that whole carbon breakdown and recycling process. It might mean less carbon being processed or stored in the ocean, which could, down the line, affect atmospheric CO2 levels, maybe ocean acidity, maybe even food chains if nutrient cycling gets messed up.
Wow, so these microscopic skirmishes could actually have planetary consequences. It's kind of mind-boggling.
It really is. It shows how interconnected everything is, right down to the microbial level.
It makes sense then why Farron Garcia Pichel, who directs the center where this research happened, called Bacteria Microbial Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, that quote captures it perfectly.
Peaceful and helpful 1 minute, doing vital jobs, then bam, ruthless predators the next, all driven by whether or not there's enough food around.
It's a dynamic and, frankly, pretty brutal world down there, far from the simple picture we often have.
Well, this deep dive has definitely revealed that. The lesson seems to be that even the smallest forms of life are way more cunning and perhaps more ruthless than we tend to imagine. So, something for you, our listener, to think about. If scarcity, just not having enough resources, drives this kind of extreme, calculated survival tactic, even in bacteria, what does that suggest about the deep-down drivers of evolution and competition everywhere? Across all life, maybe even in, our own human societies.
That is certainly a provocative question to leave things on.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.